now that we have established that why Gaza was blockaded in the first place, now we can answer the myth of the open-air prison. Was Gaza an open-air prison? In my opinion, well, no. If we examine the facts, we will find that even with Hamas controlling Gaza, the Egyptian government was still cooperating with Hamas to some extent in terms of the facilitating the travel, the trade, the entry of building materials. That is what is allowed and what is not to go into Gaza, dual-use materials that could be used for the manufacture of weapons. So there were a lot of cooperation between Egypt and Israel in order to control what can go in and out of Gaza. So, but nonetheless, people were able to travel to and from Gaza through the Rafah crossing through Egypt. On average, between 14,000 to 18,000 people from Gaza used to go to Israel on a daily basis for working. I mean, they were commuting to Israel for work, and they were given permits. And in fact, just before the crisis, just in August, the Israeli defense minister increased the number of work permit from Gaza, even though it's under Hamas control, but he increased the work permits from Gaza from 16,000 to 18,000 permits. In the past, it used to be much higher during the time of the Palestinian Authority. So building materials were going in, high rises were being constructed, many goods and materials were going in. Any Gazan can actually travel abroad if they need to. They can go just through Egypt. The process is a bit arduous, but it's not Israel's fault. It is actually Egyptian bureaucracy. And anyone will tell you that the worst passport in the world, the worst ever passport in the world, in terms of dealing with the outside world and also dealing with the issuing authority, is the Egyptian travel document for Palestinian refugees. Just ask anyone who had that document, and goodness, I knew quite a few people who had that document, and trust me, they always used to say that, to me, when they say, Ayman, the moment I get another passport, from another country, I'm going to take this and I'm going to use it as toilet paper and then flush it down the toilet. That's how much many Palestinians used to hate the Egyptian travel document. And I remember when I used to ask them, would you prefer an Israeli one? And every single one of them, they would have said yes over the Egyptian travel document one, because the trouble they had with dealing with Egyptian authorities, as well as the fact that it is hardly an acceptable document by many countries around the world. It is written by hand. If you believe it? It's a handwritten document. No one can travel on that. But nonetheless, the situation in Gaza wasn't as dire as people might tell you. Life was going on, but it was harder than before, because we have to face the reality that the territory was controlled by an organization proscribed as terrorist by most of the advanced economies of the world. And then from 2014, they were designated terrorists by Egypt, their main backer and neighbor, by Saudi Arabia, by the United Arab Emirates. So therefore, it was a little bit difficult for Hamas to just have normal trade relations with the rest. And don't forget that by taking over Gaza Strip in 2007, they have effectively split the Palestinian Authority into two. And so the West Bank is one entity and Gaza is another entity. And that is actually a testament to how it is difficult to run a state that is separated by geography. Look at East and West Pakistan. It lasted from 1947 until 1971, and I'm amazed that that it lasted that long. But East and West Pakistan in the end broke up, and Bangladesh was born as a separate entity and a separate country, because you just can't run two separate entities at the same time from a central government. And the fact of the matter is, let us face it, that Gazans are very different from people of the West Bank. The West Bank until 1967 was part of Jordan, and until 1967 Gaza was part of Egypt. And The two are very different. Different tribes, different families, even different accent and different food style and different culture altogether. And this is why you have a lot of tension sometimes between the two. And this is translated in the fact that even as we see the crisis unfolding, the reaction of the people of the West Bank is less than the reaction we see in Yemen or on the streets of London. I mean, we have to say it. Like, I mean, the amount of unrest that we see on the streets of London and Paris is far greater than what we see on the streets of Ramallah, Nablus, Tulkarm, and Hebron. The other thing we have to say is that Hamas also was able to construct a comprehensive and sophisticated network of tunnels between Egypt and Gaza that were a lifeline to some extent to many of the Gazans who wanted to import dual-use materials and some items that are rather exotic, and I will be talking about it. For example, they were importing cement and they were importing fertilizer, which is the main ingredient for some explosives, and also importing a lot of chemicals that were prohibited, but yet they were able to bring them, as well as anti-aircraft missiles, as well as proper missiles from Iran. So they were smuggling considerable amount of munitions also. But one of the interesting facts about smuggling, and by the way, I'm fascinated by tunnels. I mean, the role of tunnels in breaking sieges and how you can actually bypass blockades using tunnels. I remember I've seen the tunnel in Mount Egman in Sarajevo and how it was an important lifeline during the Chetnik Serbs siege of Sarajevo. So for me, the most interesting story is how they smuggled a lioness, a pregnant lioness. I don't know how they did it. They just brought it all the way to the Sinai desert, smuggled that poor beast into the tunnels, and then they brought it out of the other side. And thank God, they brought that lioness into the Gaza zoo in time for her to give a birth to two, lovely cubs. All I'm saying is, no, Gaza was not an open-air prison that necessitated such extreme act in order to break out of. Thank you.